Okay, Parshas Vayiqra. In the Meforshim, you know how they refer to Vayiqra? The Chizkuni calls it Torah's Kohanim. Torah's Kohanim means the Torah, the laws for the Kohanim. That makes sense. In Latin, how does the non-Jewish world in the Bible refer to Sefer Vayiqra? Bereshis is Genesis, which is creation. Shemos is Exodus, you leave. Mm-hmm. What is Vayiqra called? Leviticus. What does Leviticus stand for?
Gaza?
It stands for Levi.
Yeah. Oh.
Leviticus, the book of Levi, which is the Kohanim again. So it makes sense. Leviticus. And then they have Numbers and Deuteronomy, but that's what it is. So again, Shevet Levi. Someone mentioned, interesting, that you say the pasuk Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. The word Shema, Shin, refers to Shlomim. Mem, Mincha. Ayin, Ola. Those are three different types of korbanos. Echad, Osham. The Aleph is Osham, is another korban. Chet is Chatos, another type of a korban. And the Dalit are the four people who bring a korban toda, the thank you korban, for if you were sick, or if you were in jail, if you crossed the desert or the ocean. So the word Shema and the word Echad covers all the korbanot. It's an easy way to remember all the different korbanot. Now, there was recently a convention for Dirshu. Dirshu is an organization where they learn Mishnah Brura, they learn Gemara. It's world over. They test, they give money out to yeshiva guys for learning. And at the convention, Rav Yitzchak Sorotzkin spoke. And I have here what he said. It's an interesting speech that he gave. He asked a question. He said, when Yaakov came to Egypt, Egypt was in the middle of a famine. How many years was supposed to be the famine? 7 years. How many years had been so far? Only 2. When Yaakov came down to Egypt, what happened to the famine? It stopped. So he says, Avraham, it says clearly when Avraham got to Eretz Canaan, there was a famine. He went down to Egypt, it didn't stop. The famine continued. So Avraham couldn't stop the famine. Yitzchak, it says there was a famine during the days of Yitzchak. Hunger. Did Yitzchak stop the hunger? No. He was successful, but he didn't stop the hunger. Comes Yaakov, Yaakov stops the hunger. Comes down to Egypt, boom, the hunger stops. Question is why? That was his question. What was it? So he brings down an interesting pasuk in Novi. In Novi it says, one day there'll be a hunger, but not for food. There'll be a hunger to learn Torah. There'll be a hunger to hear a nice shir. People will be hungry that they just can't go anywhere to hear something nice. He says, when Yaakov came down to Egypt, before he walked into the city of Goshen, he already had sent Yehuda in advance. What did Yehuda set up? A yeshiva, learning. He says, the minute Yaakov established a foundation of learning, the hunger stopped. Avraham didn't have that, Yitzchak didn't have that, Yaakov had it. Then he brings down the Gemara in Baba Basra, very interesting Gemara. The Gemara in Baba Basra says that during the days of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rebbe HaKodesh, there was a hunger. But he had storehouses, he was very wealthy. And people came to him for food. So if you learned Torah, he gave you food. If you were totally ignorant, you never learned any Torah, he wouldn't give you any food. One of the Amoraim, Rabbi Yonasan ben Amram, came, and he didn't like this rule of Rebbe. So he says, Rebbe, I'm hungry, feed me. He says, did you learn Chumash today? He said, no. Did you learn Novi today? No. Did you learn Gemara today? No. He says, well, why should I feed you? You don't learn, why should I feed you? He says, am I any worse than the raven or the dog? Hashem feeds them, feed me. So in the end, he gave him something to eat, and it says that he was very upset about it. And when he asked him, Rebbe, why are you so upset? He says, you know why I'm so upset? He says, because I believe people who are ignorant caused the hunger in the first place. So I'm trying to solve the problem by getting everybody to learn, and here I fed you. It's like you caused the problem in the first place. He brings down a story from the Chofetz Chaim, a very interesting story. It says that the Chofetz Chaim was once in St. Petersburg, and he was walking on the street in St. Petersburg, and there in a non-kosher restaurant, the Chofetz Chaim saw a student of his who once learned in the yeshiva. So he waits, and when the student comes out, the Chofetz Chaim says to his student, how could you be in this treif restaurant? How could you be eating in this treif restaurant? So the student says, Rebbe, you don't understand. I wasn't eating anything treif. I wasn't buying pork. I had a salad. I had different things, but not anything treif. She says, well, what were you doing there? He says, a lot of the Russian officials eat in this restaurant. So I eat there and I become friends with them. And this way, if there's ever an evil decree against the Jewish community, I have their numbers in my Rolodex. So I'm able to give them a call and say, Ivan, there's a decree against the city of Radin. We got to get rid of this decree. So he says, I do this to help the Jewish people. So the Chofetz Chaim said to him, let me give you an example, he says. There are two people in the middle of winter in a wagon. And one of them, Moshe, says to his friend Reuven, he says, Reuven, your ears are frostbitten. They're frostbite. He says, if you don't do something, you'll lose your hearing. He says, what should I do? My ears are frozen. He says, take snow and rub it on your ears. So the guy says, you crazy? It was the snow that made my ears freeze in the first place. He says, I know. But if you rub snow, it will warm up the ear. And he warms up the ear and it works. So Shlomo says to Reuven, he says, we're so lucky this happened in the winter. Because if it happened in the summer, I wouldn't have had any snow. So of course he looked at him and says, idiot, If it would have been in the summer, you would have been frozen in the first place. So the Chofetz Chaim said to this guy, he says, you think you're saving the Jewish community because you eat in this treif restaurant. Yeah. If you wouldn't walk into the restaurant, you would say, well, there wouldn't be any decrees. Hashem is sending all these bad things because you're eating in the restaurant. Get out of the restaurant. Hashem won't send this, like, get out of the winter, you'll be the summer. So this rabbi said, today we have more Torah learning than ever before. Yeshivas are bursting at the seams. And yet, you pick up a newspaper, and every day there's more crime and more violence and anti-Semitism. And there's so many crazy things going on with the education system. There's so many crazy things going on that the Jewish community can't figure out where's this coming from. We're learning more Torah today than we ever learned before, and yet day after day after day, things are getting worse, worse, and worse. So this rabbi says, I know what the problem is. And it's a fascinating thing. And my wife once commented to me on this. He says, you go to a yeshiva, any yeshiva. You go to Mir, Lakewood, Torah Vodas, any yeshiva. Let's say the morning Seder starts at 9 a.m. till 1 o'clock. At 1 o'clock, when the Seder's over, now the boys have a break, they have mincha, whatever it is, go to any yeshiva. You know what you're going to see? All the boys coming out of the base medrash, the first thing is they get on their phones and they're on their phones. Yeah. They're always on their phones. My wife, in Kew Gardens, we see boys from the yeshiva walking up and down 116th Street on their phones. And my wife says, I don't get it. That kid is 18 years old. Who was he talking to at 1 o'clock in the afternoon? It's not as if he has, he's engaged, it's not as his wife. Who was he talking to? She can't figure it out. She doesn't understand. Friends, whatever it is. So this rabbi said, he says, in my day, when we were finished at 1 o'clock, we would walk out of the base medrash, but we were still thinking about what we were learning. We were still talking and arguing and discussing. Today, the minute the Seder is over, you could be in the middle of a sentence. Boom! They close the book, they got out their phones, and they live on their phones. They just live on their phones. I see women walking, they have one kid in this hand, they're running the carriage like this, and they're holding their phone like this. And they're walking across the street, the light screen, cars are coming, and they don't even see what they're doing. They're so distracted. You think distracted is only when you drive. They're distracted their whole life. People call me on my cell phone all the time, and they're shocked. I said, well, where's your cell phone? I said, it's on my desk downstairs. You don't keep it with you? I said, no, I don't keep it with me. You don't have it at the dinner table? No, I don't have it at the dinner table. I just don't. We don't do that. So it's just an amazing thing. That's what he said. In my days, my Rosh Yeshiva once said to me that a boy who came, the Seder begins at 9, you come at 9 o'clock, and at 1 o'clock when it's over, you close the book and you go, you're called a good student, but you'll never be a Talmud Chacham. You'll never be a leader. What does it take to be a leader? You come 5 to 9. And at 1 o'clock, you stay an extra minute or two. He says, 5 minutes early and 2 minutes longer, that makes a difference between a good student and a Talmud Chacham. We're not talking about someone that stays hours longer. He says 2 minutes longer. You're in the middle of a line, finish the line. Who cares that it's 1 o'clock? Finish the thought. That makes all the difference in the world. Rav Zilberstein had a case. Listen to this case. Rav Zilberstein had a boy come to him and says to him, Rebbe, I have to do teshuvah. Parshas Vayiqra, it's all about korbanot. When you make a mistake, you have to do teshuvah. You have to say sorry to Hashem. So he asked, what did you do? What was your sin? He says, amongst Ashkenazim, Sephardim have a different custom. But we, during the 9 days, from Rosh Chodesh Av until after Tisha B'Av, what don't we eat? Meat. We don't eat meat. How could we have meat? On Shabbat you could have meat. Or if you do a siyum, you finish a Masechta of Gemara. So he says, in the Tanya, there is the famous Galei Sanz Hotel, and there's a hospital there and everything else. So the Kloisenberger Rebbe used to arrange with the local yeshiva that every night one of the boys would make a siyum. This way, if anybody wanted to have a meat meal, they could have a meat meal. So Rosh Chodesh Av, they served milchas. But the second day of Av, the third day of Av, before that, they would have a different night. One boy would come in with his Gemara, he'd make a siyum, he finished the Masechta, and they could serve meat. And one day, they asked me to go in, and I said, sure. The problem was, I never finished the Masechta. I learned the first page, and I learned the last page. I didn't learn anything in between. And I went in, and I made the siyum, and everybody had meat. And it was all fake. I never did the Masechta. So I feel bad. I want to do teshuvah. How can I do teshuvah? What would you tell the boy? Finish the Masechta, right? So Rabbi Zilberstein didn't know what the answer should be, so he sent them to Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. Listen to what Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky told him. Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky asked him, how many people were there that listened to your siyum and ate meat? He said 50. He said 50? You have to finish the Masechta now 50 times.
For each person.
For each person. You have to make a siyum 50 times. I hope that Masechta was not Baba Basra, that has 176 pages. I hope that it was a smaller Masechta. Now, Rav Zilberstein thought that was excessive. He thought that was really beyond the limit. But he says, that Chaim Kanievsky told him, apologies don't replace expressions of regret. Some Averot require a lot of work to get teshuvah. You just can't say, I'm sorry. It's not about saying, I'm sorry, okay, let me free. He says 50 people ate meat and they weren't supposed to eat meat. It's not the worst sin in the world, but Tisha B'Av is about the Beis HaMikdash, the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. You lied to 50 people. You want to make it right? Not down here, in Shamayim, finish the Masechta 50 times. Seems like a hard line, but it's interesting. They bring down a story that once Reb Vosner, who was a big Rav in Bnei Brak, went to Rabbi Edelstein, a Rosh Yeshiva there, and he said to him, people tell me that whenever they ask you something, and you ask Hashem, it comes true. That Hashem always listens to you. He says, why does Hashem always listen to you? That's what Reb Vosner asked Rabbi Edelstein. Rabbi Edelstein didn't know what to answer, and he says, you know what? People come to me day and night. And I have patience to listen to them. And I don't rush them. I listen to everything they have to say. I guess Hashem says to me, since I listen to them, I'm going to listen to you. If you listen to Hashem's children, Hashem listens to you. That's what he told him. Because most people don't have the patience, don't have the time. So he brings down a story, a famous story. He says there were two brothers, Reuven and Shimon. Reuven was broke. Reuven had no money, never successful. Shimon was wealthy like you can't be. So one day, Reuven comes to his brother Shimon and says, I need a loan. My business went bad. I don't know what to do. I need a loan. Shimon says, who are you? He says, I'm your brother. I'm your brother Reuven. I'm your older brother. He says, I don't got a brother Reuven. I used to have I don't know this guy Reuven. This Reuven is a loser. I don't have a brother Reuven. So what, do you have Alzheimer's or something? You have dementia? I'm your brother. He says, no, I got no brother Reuven. He slams the door. Okay. A few weeks later, Shimon is visiting his father, and his father says to him, who are you? He says, Dad, who am I? I'm your son. I'm Shimon, your son. He says, I don't have a son, Shimon. He says, what are you talking about? Of course you have a son, Shimon. He says, no, I had a son, Reuven. Reuven had a brother, Shimon. But Reuven tells me that his brother Shimon doesn't exist anymore. So if he doesn't exist, he can't be my son. I had two children, but if Reuven says there's no Shimon, then there's no Shimon. Hashem says the same thing. I have children, Jewish people. If you look at the Jews around you and they're your brothers, I'm your father. But if Jews come to you, you're not my brother, you're not my this, you're not my that, I'm not interested in any of the Jews around me, Hashem says, guess what? I'm not interested in you. Because if you don't recognize my children, you can't be their brother. You can't be my son. So he says, so much of how we're judged is how we judge others. Very interesting. Okay, something else. Different topics tonight. Getting ready for Purim and Pesach. We call this a smorgasbord. You can choose whatever you want. There's a little sushi over here. There's a little bit over there. I learned Novi. I've always been a big fan of learning Novi. I've gone through Novi many, many times. I've taught people Novi many, many times. So I'm working with someone now. We're going through Shmuel Aleph. In Shmuel Aleph is when David HaMelech confronts Goliath. Goliath is this giant. He's like 12 feet tall or 15 feet tall. He could be the center on any basketball team. He was big and bold, and he had armor all over him. You couldn't pierce him. David, goes to Shaul HaMelech and says to him, let me take care of this guy. This guy every day comes out for 40 days. Who's going to fight me? What kind of a God do you have? You have no one to fight me. It's interesting. He came from Orpah, and they say Orpah took 40 steps with Naomi, and therefore Goliath lived for 40 days to do this. Anyway, David says to Shaul HaMelech, I'll take care of him. Shaul says, you're a kid. He wasn't a kid. He was 29 years old, but you're a kid. You're not a soldier. He says, one of the strangest things happened when I was by the sheep. One day, a lion and a bear attacked the sheep. Now, you've been to Israel. Your wife was in Israel. You see any lions and bears walking around? No, it's not Africa. It's not like the safari. There are no lions and bears walking around. So if Hashem sent a lion and a bear, and David with his slingshot killed them both, Hashem was sending David a message. One day, you're going to have to protect the Jewish people with your slingshot. This was just practice. It was a message. So Shaul says, okay, I'll let you go. David picks up 5 rocks. The Medrash says, why 5 rocks? He says, 1 rock for Hashem, because this guy was cursing God left and right. 1 rock for Avraham, 1 for Yitzchak, 1 for Yaakov. That's 4. And 1 rock for Aharon. So the Medrash said, Aharon. Why Aharon? It seems Eli had 2 children, Chafni and Pinchas, who were killed in a battle against the Plishtim. Who killed them? Goliath. So the law is that if someone kills your relative, you can take vengeance. Aaron was a Kohen. This was his blood. These were his grandchildren, great-grandchildren. So David says, who has the right to take vengeance? Aharon took a rock for Aaron. Now, the stone he threw penetrated the metal of his helmet. The Medrash says, how could stone penetrate metal? David made a deal. David said to the metal, up until now, for hundreds of years, when they did Brit Milah, you know how they did it? With a stone. But if you let the stone through, I'll make a law that you have to do Brit Milah with a knife, metal. And the metal said, I agree. It's a deal. It's fascinating. These are Medrashim, fascinating. It says when you get hit in the head, you fall back. Goliath fell forward. Hashem wanted the mouth that cursed him to be into the ground. And he had an image on his shield of his idol, Dagon. And that also hit the dirt and smashed into the dirt. The Medrashim on this are fascinating. Anyway, after this happened, remember, Shaul promised to make the guy rich and give him his daughter. So Shaul says, who is this kid? Where is this kid from? Who is he? Now, the Gemara says, the Gemara in Yevamah says, what do you mean, who is he? Shaul knew David. David used to play the harp for him, and David used to carry his weapons for him. He knew David very well. No, so Shaul said, I want to know. I know he's from Shevet Yehuda. Is he from Peretz or Zorach? There are two brothers born to Yehuda. If he's from Peretz, then he could be king one day, because that's the king line. If he's from Zorach, he'll be important, but he'll never be king. I just want to know, is he a threat? And of course, he was from Peretz. He was going to be the next king, so that got Shaul a little bit of nerves. Of course, what?
Shouldn't have the next king came from David? No, sorry, from Shaul.
It should have, but he lost that. He lost that because in the war against Amalek, instead of doing what Hashem wanted, he gave in to the will of the people. And Hashem says, I'm going to rip the kingdom from you and give it to someone else completely. He lost that. And he knew he lost it. So then Doeg Adomi, who was a Talmud Chacham, the head of the Sanhedrin, but not such a good fellow, he says to Shaul, what do you care? I don't even think he's Jewish. His grandmother is from Moab, from Rus. So Avner says, but we know what the base Medrash we learned, that it only applies to the men, not to the women. Moab, v'lo Moavit. Amo, v'lo Ammonit. So they had this whole debate. So Rabbi Yehuda Leib Ginsburg, who was a rabbi once in Denver, he wrote a sefer Musar Hanavim. And he asked the question everybody asks, but he gives an unusual answer. He says, at the end of the day, David HaMelech and Moshiach will come from a father and a mother, father from Yehuda, mother Goya, that became Gioret. Why? Why should the kings, one of the most famous kings of all, David HaMelech, Hashem's most beloved king, and Moshiach come 50% from a non-Jew? Now I understand she was Megayer, she converted, but it seems unusual. It seems strange, that mix. And he gives an answer that only he could give. He says, we all make a mistake. We think Mashiach is coming to save the Jews. Who's Mashiach coming to save? The world. The world is comprised of Jewish people and non-Jewish people. He says, Jewish people will listen to someone who's Jewish, no questions asked. Who will non-Jewish people listen to? Someone who's not Jewish. So Mashiach has to come from both. Because you have to save the whole world, not half the world. That's a fascinating answer. 2 in 1. He says, V'hu harei lo yavo lo rach l'Yisrael b'vad. He's not coming only for the Jews. Ki im l'chol ha'amim, for all the world. And if so, he says, in order for the world to listen to what he has to say, he has to be able to turn to them and say, half of me comes from you. Half of me was Jewish. My father's side was Jewish roots. But my mother's side, she converted, but my mother's side came from Moab, came from the nation of the world. I'm 50% Israeli, but I'm 50% American, or Russian, or from England. He says that it was necessary in order for Mashiach to be effective that should happen. Okay. One of the korbanot that was brought was a sin offering. What kind of an animal did you bring for a sin offering?
Sheep.
A sheep, a female goat or sheep. Got it. How many did you bring? One. Okay. Now, who decided if you brought it or not? You decided. If you did the sin on purpose, mazid, did you bring a korban? No. For that you had to daven and fast. There was no sacrifice if you did the sin on purpose. You only brought a korban if you did the sin by mistake. What if someone held a gun to your head and said, either do this sin or I'm going to kill you? And you did it. Do you have to bring a korban? No. That's called ones. If I was forced against my will, then I don't bring a korban. So who decides whether you did it on purpose, or it was a mistake, or you were forced? Only you. Most of the sins are done in private. There are no witnesses. No one sees you do the sin. So you decide what happened, and you decide how to do teshuvah, and you decide what it is that you want to do. So it was all about you. You made the decisions. Okay. If you decided I did the sin by mistake, so you bring a sheep or a goat. What happens if you're poor? You can't afford a sheep or a goat.
No.
What do you bring now?
No.
A dove. You bring either a dove, or maybe a pigeon or a dove, but let's say a dove. Now, how many doves do you bring? One or two? Two.
One dove.
Gold.
You bring two. One for chatas and one for ola. Chatas is a sin offering, ola is for thought. By the sheep, you only bring one. If you're poor, you bring a dove, you have to bring two. What if you're really, really, really poor? You can't even afford a dove.
Bread.
Flour.
No.
And that you only bring one little pile, chatas. So it seems there are three levels. If you're wealthy, you bring one korban, one animal. If you're poor, you bring two. But if you're really poor, you bring one. So why does the middle category bring two? So he gives a very fascinating answer from the Ibn Ezra. The Ibn Ezra was one of the Rishonim. And the Chidah brings this down. He says from the Ibn Ezra, he says, a person who is poor, he hasn't hit bottom, he just is unsuccessful. And now he made a sin. So he has to bring two birds. You know why? Because he's angry. He's angry he did the sin, and he's angry that Hashem made him poor. So one he has to bring for the sin. And the other, because he's in his head, he's thinking, why does Hashem make my life like this? Therefore he has to bring one for the thoughts as well. When a person is very poor, then the poorness itself forgives them. So they just have to bring some flour, and it's the poverty itself forgives them, he says. But he says when a person is just not here, he's just like going down, 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 he says he has such angry thoughts. Why is God doing this? He complains against God all the time. I hate my life, I hate my situation, I hate what's going on. And therefore, when he has to bring that korban, he brings a korban that includes an olah for all the thoughts that he had. Okay. Vayiqra.
Ola?
Olah, it's called. Olah is a burnt up offering to forgive thoughts that you had. Chatas is if you actually do something. It's very hard. It's very hard to control your thoughts. It says that everything has a double system. The tongue has lips and teeth, shuts you out. The eye have eyelids. The ears have earlobes. The one thing that doesn't have an extra pocket or extra is the brain. You can't take your brain and wrap it into something to protect thoughts. You can close your eyes and your ears and your mouth, even your nose you can close, but you can't close your brain. Your brain always works. So you're always stuck with your thoughts. And whether you're successful or not in controlling your thoughts, that's what the korban olah was there for. Okay. Vayiqra el Moshe. In most of the time in the Torah, when Hashem calls to Moshe, what does it say? Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe, leimor. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, leimor. only 3 times it says, Vayiqra el Moshe. Hashem called to Moshe. This time Moshe felt that how could he write, Hashem called me? Like that's so personal. So he made the letter Aleph small. The Medrash says that he had enough ink in his pen to write the Torah, so because he made a small Aleph instead of a bigger Aleph, he had a few drops of ink left over. What did he do with those few drops of ink? Hashem took it and put it on his forehead, and then his face began to shine. And people couldn't even look at him, they had to wear a veil or something. Moshe's his face was so bright. That was the reward.
So it's only once the small island.
That's right, only once. Now, when do we have the other psukim where it says Hashem called to Moshe? 3 times. The first time was by the burning bush. It says, Vayiqra Elav Elokim mitoch hasneh. Hashem called to Moshe from the bush. Okay. It was the first time Hashem spoke to Moshe. So he had no choice but to call him. So the Aleph is regular. Moshe understood that. The second time was on Har Sinai. Hashem said to Moshe, I'm going to call you. And all the Jews are going to hear me call you. This way they'll know that the Torah came from me to you. So there's no small Aleph. It says, Vayiqra el Moshe bayom hashvi. Hashem called Moshe on the 7th day from the clouds, and Hashem appeared to everybody, and they all gathered. But here was after the Mishkan was set up. So now Hashem is in his own house, and Hashem calls and says, come on over. Why didn't Moshe just go by himself? So the Gemara says, you have to have common sense. Just because you're so close to Hashem doesn't mean you have the right to just walk in, right? Not that the Navi did that, and it cost them their lives. Okay, Moshe knew better than that. Moshe just, when Hashem wants me, he'll call me. And then Moshe went in. But he felt so bad that Hashem called me and nobody else heard, so he made the letter Aleph small. So Moshe had a certain anivus, but he understood there's a place to be humble, and there's a place not to be humble. He understood the difference between the two, so we have some examples of both that happened. Okay, let's go from the Otzer Pelos HaTorah. So it brings down that Moshe put the ink on his forehead shined. Question, before you bring a korban, what did the Kohen do? They put their hands on top of the animal, and they would say whatever the sins were. So someone asked the question, on Erev Yom Kippur, in the olden days, some people do it today also, you take a chicken, right, and you swing it over your head, and kaporot. Do you put your hands on top of the chicken and say, I put all my averot on this chicken, when this chicken gets slaughtered and goes to tzedakah, I should get forgiven for all my averot? Do we put our hands on top of the chicken and do that? So the answer is no. Why? So the Rambam says that even in the Beit HaMikdash, they only put their hands on the top of animals, never on the birds. They never put their hands on top of the dove or the turtle dove or the pigeons. They never did that. So he says, if they never did it in the Beit HaMikdash, why should we do it? But the Rambam says that Avol Ein Isser V'zeh, but it's not forbidden. So if someone wants to do it, you can let them do it. So it's interesting. Some people, but he brings down over here, Ulamaisa, but reality is, our custom is not to do that. Those who do kaporot, Erev Yom Kippur, don't put their hands on top of the chicken, and don't put the averos on top of the chicken, and they don't say, when this chicken gets slaughtered, all my sins should be forgiven. We just don't do that, But it's an interesting idea, but we don't do that. Then he has a question, are women kosher to do shechita? Let's say a woman says, I want to be a shochet. It's a good job, gets good money, I like the hours. Early in the morning, I get home by noon. Discrimination. And she joins the union. I want to be a shochet.
Only men shochet.
So the question is, can women be a shochet?
Not allowed.
Not allowed. I saw, there's a whole discussion, next week we'll talk about it. Can a shochet be a chazan?
Can the shochet be chazan?
Be the chazan in shul.
Chazan.
What's the problem?
Because the shochet cuts the vocal cords. So since he cuts the cords of animals that they can't call out, maybe he can't call out like the Chazan on behalf of the Jewish people.
Oh, okay.
It cannot be Chazal.
Good point.
I didn't say that. There's a whole discussion. Next week I'm going to bring you different opinions. I'm not sure I'm going to be here next week. Next week, actually, I might be away. We might have to skip next week. But there's an interesting question. Can that show? In some shuls, the Chazan was only the Shochet. And in some shuls, they would not allow the Chazan to be the Shochet to be the Chazan. It's very interesting, the back and forth.
What if the rabbi is the Chazan?
Yeah.
The rabbi of the shul is the Chazan, he's the shochet. What's he do?
What does he do? We had a case
Yeah,
in
no.
Torah once where the shul hired a rabbi, an older shul, where people were older, and they found out that the rabbi was a Kohen.
Yeah.
And they said, we hired the rabbi because he's going to be able to do the funerals, because we're all older people. But if he's a Kohen, he can't do the funerals.
Yeah.
So they wanted to fire the rabbi because he was a Kohen. He didn't tell them that he was a Kohen. And he didn't tell them on purpose because he was afraid they weren't going to hire them. Leave her, she's enjoying. So, is the shul right? Can they fire the Kohen, the rabbi because he's a Kohen? They hired a rabbi to do funerals. He says, I'll do all the simchas, I'll come to all the weddings, but I won't come to any of the funerals. I'll be a simcha rabbi. What would you do? If you had a rabbi in your shul, who you want him to be there, God forbid if there's a funeral, to give the eulogy, to go to the cemetery, and you find out that in your shul, every time someone dies, you have to hire an outside rabbi. And you were on the board. What would you do?
It depends how good he is.
They were going to give this rabbi a chance. The
Yeah.
decision was that they had to keep the rabbi for 1 year. If after 1 year they still wanted to fire him, they could fire him. So they gave us, we gave them a chance to see how good he was.
Yeah.
But after the year, they did let him go. Because they really wanted someone to take care of the funerals.
Yeah.
And they didn't have money for an assistant rabbi, so, but he knew when they hired him that he was a Kohen, he didn't tell them.
So he's one.
You know, if you don't ask the questions,
You don't.
you know, I didn't lie to you. You never asked me if it was not Kohen. And when he came to shul for the Shabbos and they gave him an aliyah, they gave him mafter, so it didn't make a difference. See, they never asked him. But it's an interesting question. You talk about what happens if it happens. Okay, can women do shchita? So there's a Tosos in Masechet Chulin. He says, Kosu behilchos Eretz Yisrael. It's written in the laws of Israel. The noshim lo yishchatu. Women should not shecht. Why? Because shechita requires a tough neshama. And women, their neshama is too compassionate. And if they have to cut the throat of an animal and the animal cries out, and it's going to be too much for them.
Some women are very manly.
Okay. So he says, Tosos,
Yeah.
they ain't near it. That doesn't seem good enough a reason for me. Therefore, he says, women can shecht.
They could.
Yeah. Tosos says they can shecht.
Okay.
The Sefer HaKona, he argues on Tosos, and he says women cannot shecht, they're not allowed to.
Also, some women might have this, like they say, they have this desire to kill, like people. Like they can use the killing animals as like a, I don't know, a way of lowering their desire.
That's interesting, because one of the reasons why a shochet can't be a chazan is because he killed animals. He has a cruel streak in him, and he can't have a chazan who has a cruel streak davening to Hashem for mercy.
Yeah, that's also right.
So it works both ways.
Yeah.
The Tur. Have you ever heard of the Tur?
Yeah.
Before the Shulchan Aruch, we had the Tur. He says, Hakol shochtin. Everybody's kosher to be a shochet, even women. The Tur is a halacha sefer. The Beis Yosef, he agrees with Tosfos. Women are kosher for shechita. The Beis Yosef says that. The Ramah says that the custom is not to let women shecht. However, if your community allows women to do shechita, if that's your custom, you can continue. You don't have to stop it. So it comes out that women are actually kosher to do shechita. Some people say they can do shechita only for their family, but they cannot do for the rest of the community. But in the end, they allow women to do shechita. So I found that to be very fascinating. That women, there's equality. Next, when you set your table on Shabbos, and you put the challah, the table is like a mizbeach, the challah is like the korbanot. After you make hamotzi, what do you dip the challah in? Salt. The Chassam Sofer would not dip his bread in salt on Friday night. Why? He says every night they would burn korbanot from the daytime, but only Friday night the mizbeach was closed. Shabbat morning they burnt the korbanot for Shabbat, so he had salt on Shabbat morning. But Friday night he says nothing ever burnt on the mizbeach Friday night. Therefore he did not dip his bread in salt on Friday night. Then there's an interesting halacha, the Kaf HaChaim. You ever hear of the Kaf HaChaim? Good Ashkenazi guy? Guess not. The Kaf HaChaim says, you come to the table Friday night, you're the husband. You come to the table Friday night, the challah is there, the knife is there, there's no salt. Who should bring the salt to the table?
Why?
Should you go and get the salt?
Yes.
Should your wife go get the salt, or one of your kids get the salt? Those are your three choices. You, your wife, or your child. Who should get the salt?
Right,
Who?
right.
Wife. Why do you say wife?
Because if we pay table for Shabbat.
What do you say, sir? You're single, so you have luxury to make a mistake.
I think it should be the husband.
You should think it'd be the husband. What do you say?
I think I could say nothing.
What do you say?
I'm confused.
The Kaf HaChaim. The Kaf HaChaim says, mitzvah zu, the mitzvah of putting salt on the table, mutelis ala noshim, is for your wife. It's her mitzvah. Even if you wanted to, you shouldn't do it. Let your wife do it.
Wow.
You know why?
We should order for
You know why?
why?
Because Lot's wife got punished because she was so stingy she wouldn't bring salt. Lot's wife would not bring salt. So what do we see? That we have to make sure our wives are not like Lot's wife. That they're kind and generous. How do you know if they're kind and generous or not?
They bring salt.
They bring salt. The Kaf HaChaim. You know, you can't make this stuff up. Sometimes you see something that comes out of left field, but it says, whoa, it makes a lot of sense. It says, mitzvah zu mutelas ala noshim lahachim melech b'shulchan. It's a mitzvah for women to bring the salt to the table. V'yodua, because it is known. She'ishto shel Lot, the wife of Lot, Hayanitziv Melech, was a statue of salt. Because she wouldn't give anybody salt at the table. So therefore, it is incumbent upon the women to bring the salt to the table.
I'm right.
Can't make this stuff up. Can't make this stuff up. Okay. It says that in Parshat Zohar, Vayomer Hashem said, Ki yad al Kesyo. There'll always be a battle between the Jews and Amalek. Rashi says, Kes was Kisei, the aleph disappeared at the end of the word. Yud Hey is Hashem's name. 2 letters, the Vav Hey, disappeared. Hashem said, as long as Amalek is in the world, my throne and my name are not whole. So what letters are missing? The Vav, the Hey, and the Aleph. What does it say in the Megillah? V'nahapech hu, Hey, Vav, Aleph. By killing Haman, Mordechai turned the world's fate around. Who? Those 3 letters came back. She said to Hashem, here's your Aleph for your throne, and here's your Vav He for your name. Mordechai took the loss that Hashem felt with Amalek in the world, and he says, I can put it back now and make things right.
Rabbi,
It was short term, but he could do it. Yes, sir.
why is the olive needed for Hashem's throne?
Because Hashem said, the word case, Chof Samach, is missing the Aleph for Kisei. Hashem says, my throne, my kingdom, is not solid as long as there's Amalek in the world. Right, took the Aleph out. Now, it's very hard for us to understand Amalek. Really, it really is. The only examples we could give to that is Nazi Germany. Because the Vilna Gaon says that Nazi Germany was Amalek, where you had a country who made it their life mission to hunt and kill Jews. And it's shocking, I was in Poland, I went through Poland, and there were communities that to get to, like Rodin, you had to drive on a bus for 4 hours to get there. Like, we asked ourselves, why are we doing it? Because we wanted to go see the Chafetz Chaim's grave. But the Germans did it. Why did the Germans send an army 4 hours to a city like Rodin? Because there was 150 Jews there? Would you take thousands or hundreds of soldiers and divert them for 150 old Jews? Germany did. It's just shocking. It's just shocking. You have this guy, he's a white supremacist in New Zealand, and he takes guns and he kills 50 people. Who does that? That means they're a Muslim. You don't like a Muslim. You disagree with them. You don't believe in their religion. Okay, you have your faith, they have their faith. We don't go around killing 50 people at a time like that. Who does that? That's Amalek. What was he? He was a white supremacist. He was a Nazi. He believed in the Nazi culture. I mean, when Hashem says that this force called Amalek has such a deep-rooted hatred that they commit atrocities, they commit mass murders. Until our day, nobody understood what that meant. There was in the Newsday, there was they had these like political cartoons. So they had this old man speaking to a little girl. And the old man was saying to the little girl, in our day, we fought Nazis. And she says, in her head, she's saying, I hate to tell you, Grandpa, we're fighting them today also. This guy thought we defeated that 60 years ago. Nobody believed, You would think you would see a swastika somewhere today. I mean, it's now 2019. You're in the United States of America. You think you would open up the newspaper and find that some cemetery was spray painted with swastikas, or some college professor has a swastika on her door? Would you have thought that? Who does that? Where does that come from? That hatred? From where? You don't see it on television. You don't see it in the movie. Where does it come from? And yet it's happening more now in the last few years than ever before. So, when we do Shabbos Zachor and we remember Amalek, it's not just to eradicate that philosophy. There's no neutrality here. You can't be parved. There's no, when you hear of acts of hatred against anyone, it makes no difference, Muslim, Jew, black, white, makes no difference. You condemn it.
Who Amalek? Muslim or?
No, Amalek is a country that hates everybody. They just hate.
Germany?
This is a
The
mix
Vilna
of-
Gaon says it was
mix of,
Germany during that time, World War II. Yes.
I think this just mix of the Esav and
Amalek comes from Esav. That's correct. Amalek is Esav.
Ishmael and Esav.
It's a mixture, a
A
little
mix.
bit of both. Now, it's very interesting. We don't have many interaction with Amalek in the Navi. There was one. Shaul HaMelech got killed in battle. Now the truth is he fell on his sword, but he didn't die right away. And Shaul was always trying to kill David. So the Navi says that a Ger Amaleki someone from Amalek who said, I converted to Judaism, comes to David and says to David, I killed Shaul HaMelech. Why did he tell David that? Because he thought David would give him a reward. Shaul tried to kill you. I took care of your enemy. Maybe you'll make me a general.
His father-in-law.
What?
David's father-in-law.
David's father-in-law. You know, the fact that his father-in-law hated him, well, we expected that. That's not news.
Father-in-law, wife, father.
It was
Yeah.
Michal's father. So David says to the Ger Amaleki, your mouth condemned you. And he had him killed on the spot. So they all ask, first of all, we never accepted a ger from Amalek. No one from Amalek could convert. So they say he was a Jewish person who grew up amongst the Amaleki. Ger means I live amongst the Amaleki. So they said, well, there are no witnesses, no one warned him. But David said, no Jew, even though the king was wounded, the king said, please kill me, don't let me fall in the hands of the Goyim. No Jew would kill their king. If you killed your king, and then you come and brag about it, I'm from Amalek, he says, you have a big mouth. Right or wrong, you have a big mouth. And your mouth is what caused your life to end. And David had him killed. For raising his hand against Hashem's anointed, whatever Shaul HaMelech's sins were, that's between Hashem and Shaul. For you to kill the Moshiach Hashem's anointed, there was going to be no mercy at all. And there wasn't. Even when Agag was brought to Shmuel, he thought, oh, now the old man, he's not going to kill me. What did Shmuel do? Shmuel killed him on the spot. And Shmuel said to him, why am I doing this? Because you have no mercy for anybody else. Your sword has made more widows than anything else. And I'm going to bring an end to your violence. And Shmuel was not a violent man. Shmuel was, and that's what Purim is. Purim is, we take a time out to celebrate life and the joys of life, but we do more than that. What we do on Purim more than anything else is we try to understand, we're reaching the end of here, we try to understand that the world has to be a safe place. And the world cannot be safe. We okay over there? Yeah. Well, the world cannot be safe if hatred has the right to go unchecked. Today there was a stabbing in Israel. A father, a Rav, someone that had smicha, was killed. He fought against the terrorists. There's people are dying every day. Violent deaths. And that's what we have to find a way to turn around. I'm not sure the answer, because things seem to have been getting worse, not better. The